The Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina contain some of the highest peaks in the eastern U.S., including Mount Mitchell, the tallest mountain east of the Rockies. This, combined with the deep and winding river valleys, makes building rail lines through this stretch of mountains very difficult. However, this is where one of North America's most scenic railway story was written. This is the story of the Blue Ridge and Western Railroad, which, for the record, is completely fake and I made up for my model railroad.
This video is brought to you by Model Railroad Academy. Model Railroad Academy is your online resource for model railroad instructions, ideas, and information, with loads of tutorials and articles for model railroaders of every skill level.
One of my favorite videos that I've watched recently is making your own homemade ballast, and it's just a really cool tutorial that shows you how to make custom ballast in case you're doing a prototype that doesn't have a commercially available ballast. Plus, you can find tutorials on everything from bench work to electronics to scenery, all sorts of things there. The first 1,000 people to sign up at the link in the description below will get a full year of premium membership to Model Railroad Academy for $1.49. Offer is valid for new members only. The Blue Ridge and Western is my freelanced railroad based on the mountains of northwest North Carolina, one of my favorite places on earth. And using a bit of creative storytelling, some altering of historical facts, and a little bit of generative AI, we're going to bring the history of this fictional railroad to life. Now, to be clear, everything you're about to hear is fictional with some historical truths baked in there, but mostly fiction. The history of the Blue Ridge and Western starts way back in the 1890s with the Eastern Tennessee and Western North Carolina Railroad, better known as the Tweetsie Railroad. This was a narrow gauge railroad that ran from Elizabethton, Tennessee to Boone, North Carolina, with a standard gauge section between Elizabethton and Johnson City. Before this railroad, only one rail line had successfully crossed the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina. This went through Asheville and left the northwestern part of the state isolated until the Eastern Tennessee and Western North Carolina was built. The railroad ran as a critical artery to the towns along the Linville River and all the way to Boone. This was one of only two rail lines in the mountains of northwest North Carolina, the other being the Norfolk and Western's Abingdon branch that ran to West Jefferson. In 1940, a massive flood destroyed portions of the rail line between Cranberry and Boone. The company abandoned those lines and sold them to the federal government, which saw them as a potential strategic asset. Access to newly incorporated North Carolina ports for the West Virginia coal fields was limited by the natural barrier of the Appalachians. Trains would either have to go through Virginia and head south, cut south to Charlotte, North Carolina, or Spartanburg, South Carolina, and use the Southern Railway route through Asheville, or the relatively new Clinchfield Railroad through Marion, North Carolina. Businesses and officials have been looking for a way to shorten the time between the coal fields and the North Carolina ports of Wilmington and Morehead City. A route heading east out of Johnson City, Tennessee seemed like the ideal option, and since a significant portion of the grading had been completed from the previous railroad, North Carolina Senator Robert Reynolds, a proponent of President Roosevelt's New Deal, partnered with senators from Tennessee, West Virginia, and Virginia to lobby for congressional funding of the new rail line. Just before Thanksgiving of 1940, Congress approved funds to aid in the construction of a standard gauge rail line in the old Eastern Tennessee and Western North Carolina right-of-way and connect the line from Elizabethton, Tennessee to the Southern Railway branch in Wilkesboro, North Carolina, the Clinchfield Railroad in Spruce Pine, and the Norfolk and Western Railroad in West Jefferson. The goal was to open up the transportation of coal to the North Carolina ports of Wilmington and Morehead City. Originally, the Clinchfield Railroad appeared to want to build the line, but soon bowed out and settled for two connections in Spruce Pine and Johnson City. Eventually, the North Carolina Railroad Company, a mostly state-owned railroad, agreed to oversee and maintain the line in exchange for trackage fees and revenue from industries along that section of railroad. However, with a portion of the line in Tennessee, lawmakers in both states could not come to an agreement. This was until Jim Daniels, a local businessman, proposed that an independent railroad company with shared investment from each state be formed. This became known as the Blue Ridge Independent Division, or Blue Ridge Lines. It would have 2 yards, Spruce Pine and Wilkesboro. Construction began in the spring of 1941. When the U.S. entered World War II, the project was deemed of national importance for natural resources and construction was expedited, with the rebuilding of the old line connecting the Clinchfield Railroad and Spruce Pine and Elizabethton completed by 1944, and the new section between Boone and West Jefferson completed by 1948. This left one section remaining, the connector between the mountain communities and Wilkesboro. A 12-year endeavor began to build what became known as the Wilkes Loops, a series of switchbacks and tunnels that navigated a steep escarpment between Deep Gap and Wilkesboro, North Carolina. This was a total drop of over 2,000 feet in elevation. The track began with a tunnel between Fire Scale Mountain, popping out just north of Ivy Point Ridge. The tracks then curl around a Tompkins Knob with a trestle connecting 2 small ridges. The tracks then loop around the valley before they come to what the Wilkes Loops are known for, the 4 bridges. In order to keep the grade of the track below 2%, a series of 4 bridges was built to connect the track between the tops of various foothills east of Deep Gap. The first bridge is the Little Fork Bridge, then the longest bridge, the Yellow Hail Bridge. The track then does a switchback around a ridge line to the third bridge, the Fletcher Creek Bridge, and then the final Lewis Fork Bridge over present-day US 421. The track then slowly descends a ridge line into the valley and joins the US 421 right-of-way into Wilkesboro. With a few less spectacular bridges along the way, it nets Southern Railway at an area that will become known as the North Wilkesboro Yard. The Blue Ridge lines ran smoothly with a mix of federal funding and trackage fees to maintain the lines until the mid-80s. This was when passenger service was reintroduced to the mountainous area, with Amtrak running a single daily train between Raleigh, North Carolina and Nashville, Tennessee. By the end of the 1980s, the railroads that once scurried over the mountains had consolidated into 2 companies, Norfolk Southern and CSX. The lines were considered of vital importance to both of these companies, and neither wanted to give up the trackage rights to the mountains. CSX had become the dominant player at the Port of Wilmington, and Norfolk Southern connected to Morehead City. Ultimately, the 2 companies decided to each purchase a stake in the Blue Ridge lines, and the company was reformed as Blue Ridge Railway Holdings. Each railroad had a 25% stake in the company, with each state having a 25% stake as well. The line was home to numerous industries, and a new railroad subsidiary company was formed to service the industries, maintain the lines, and serve as additional resources for intercity freight in the region. This company was named the Blue Ridge and Western Railroad. Today, the Blue Ridge and Western, or BRW as it is known, serves as a vital connector through the Appalachian Mountains. The railroad is a low-end Class II railroad and uses mostly old Conrail power and kept its iconic blue paint color because of their main. Recently, it's been adding old Norfolk Southern locomotives. This has led the crew to nicknaming the engines Blueberries and Blackberries. The line runs between Johnson City, Tennessee, Marietta, North Carolina, and Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It is known as a rail fanner's paradise due to the 2 sets of mountain crossings with the Wilkes and Clinchfield loops, the 3 separate railroads that used the lines equally, and the unmatched spectacle of the 4 bridges area. The railroad sees dozens of freight and passenger trains per day, including the North Carolina Railroad's Mountains to the Sea train, which travels from Wilmington to Spruce Pine daily with 1 trip in each direction using old Amtrak Superliner coaches that had been refurbished and had unique North Carolina Railroad markers along with the Amtrak livery. The North Carolina Railroad offers excursion trains through the Blue Ridge and Western. They run weekly day trips using a Norfolk and Western SW7, the several old Pennsylvania passenger cars, and quarterly excursions using a Norfolk and Western Y6B 2198 painted in the Norfolk and Western blue paint scheme and old Southern Bud passenger cars. Amtrak runs the Ridge Runner that goes between Wilmington, North Carolina and Memphis, Tennessee through the mountains of North Carolina. The railroad also serves many mineral and timber industries in the area, including the unique quartz deposits found in the Spruce Pine mining district. The BRW uses all sorts of rolling stock and also leases the cars out. This led to the reporting mark being BRWX for the rolling stock and a locomotive maintaining a BRW reporting mark. The Blue Ridge and Western is often held up as a shining example of when local, state, federal, and corporate officials work together towards a common goal. This unique railroad solves a problem that none of the interested parties could figure out on their own. This was a really fun exercise. It was not only a fun dive into some history, but it has also given me some ideas for future rail projects. If you are doing a PMS railroad, consider doing something like this. It's really, really cool to do. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, and happy railroading.